Hi, I'm Matt from Fire for Effect. We're doing a video today for Glock trigger jobs. Enjoy. Alright, so what we're going to do is go ahead and take your trigger and replace that. Do a little work on your trigger bar, smooth all that up. We'll take this 5.5 pound connector and replace it with a 3.5 pound ghost trigger connector. Do some polishing on your firing pin safety and reduce the spring weight on that, and replace your trigger spring. And that's all that combined will help that trigger to get a little lighter and have a little less movement. Let's talk about the actual trigger itself. Since the beginning of Glocks coming out, people have been attempting trigger jobs on these. I did them 20 years ago. This actually is a really good way that everyone's doing it now. So basically, let me show you two different triggers here. You see the slot and the trigger, hopefully, there you go. These slots affect how much arc of movement, rotation you get when you actually rotate the trigger. When you pull it to the rear, you're actually, of course, just rotating it. And if you look right here at the slot, and remember there's a pin that's going to hold that together, but you have this much movement in your Glock factory trigger, and there's nothing wrong with that. That movement gives you a lot of forgiveness, a lot of reset and over travel, but what it does is give you that trigger that feels like it takes forever to break, and it's very long. So by replacing that, the slot in this trigger limits the take up and the over travel, and whatever term you use, but I mean the bottom line is the arc of movement here is much smaller. So that's going to give you that perception as you rotate the trigger and pull it with your finger. You don't have to do quite as much work until you get to that point where it's going to actually release the firing pin and let it fire. So a few of the things that we do, like here's a bar that's already been done. We're going to do a little bit of work back here because I feel like it's very important. If you look at the factory finish that you're going to get, let's see if we can get this stuff in focus here. The way this bar is made, it's stamped out, and so the edges of this, if you get real close to them, the one on the right hand side, you'll notice that the area right there, the surface that actually touches the firing pin, I know a lot of people call it a striker, but Glock calls it the firing pin. That part right there, as you pull the trigger, it pulls back and releases down. This interface between these two pieces right here would be basically like a sear and hammer on a 1911 or any other kind of firing system like that. So these two pieces touch. So the bottom line is we want to reduce friction and to smooth things up. So one of the things that we do pay attention to is we actually come in, and this surface right here, I put it in a fixture and actually stone it. We're not going to change the angle on that. All we're doing is giving this area right here, that surface, a nice, clean, smooth, frictionless as much as possible surface. Then of course we're polishing everything. We're going to pay special attention to this little ramp on your trigger bar, because this is what, as you pull the trigger, ramps up on that safety. If this is, you know, a little rough and you have a, you know, a lot of weight and grit and stuff in there, you're going to feel it as you pull the trigger. So just to reduce that, you notice on the factory one, it's got a nice sharp angle and a nice sharp corner on it. We get rid of that. We're going to round that over, smooth it up, and take that down. The rest of it's really just, this is a factory bar that's just been polished up, and basically all we're trying to do is reduce friction, keep things smooth, not have any rough edges any place on your trigger. And then once that's been replaced and we polish this firing pin safety and change the springs out, you're going to have a much better feeling trigger, and that's the whole goal of this. When I talked about smoothing the back of your trigger bar, this is how I do it, and I want to let you see that. So if you're going to get this flat and you keep this perpendicular to the actual movement of the trigger bar, you need a jig of some kind. Trying to hold it by hand and doing this number on it right there is probably not the best way to go. So this is a Powers custom jig that I've had for many years. It's been heavily modified by myself, but the bottom line is it will hold everything in the relationship I want, and I can actually adjust the angle, keep everything straight and smooth. So I'm going to take your bar and I'm going to work it. This is a 400 grit, basically just cutting things down until I start seeing a flat area, because that area there, because the shearing action has left it real rough. And if you looked at one that's been fired a lot, you'll start seeing the top edge kind of get a little smooth just from use. And bottom line is I'm going to work my way from rough all the way up to the finest grit I have and try to get as mirror finish on that. So this is just to let you know that when I do your trigger job, I'm not just sitting here doing it by hand. If you're going to do it right, you need to have a jig to hold everything the way it's supposed to be held. And that's how we do it here at Fire for Effect.